There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from overwork or illness, but from carrying a relationship alone. Many women know this feeling intimately. It lives in the quiet moments after an argument that never gets resolved, in the space between asking for emotional presence and receiving silence, in the years spent hoping that things will eventually change. This is the hidden cost of emotional stagnation in men, and it ripples far beyond the couple itself, touching children, shaping family dynamics, and quietly dismantling the foundation of what could have been a deeply fulfilling partnership. Emotional growth is not a luxury in relationships, it is the infrastructure. Without it, even the most promising connections begin to erode. And while this conversation is not about assigning blame, it is absolutely about accountability. Understanding how and why some men resist personal development is the first step toward recognizing the damage that resistance causes, and more importantly, what can be done about it. To understand why some men avoid emotional growth, it helps to look at where that avoidance begins. From a very early age, many boys are conditioned to suppress vulnerability. Phrases like "man up," "boys don't cry," and "stop being so sensitive" are not harmless expressions. They are instructions, repeated across years of development, that teach boys to disconnect from their inner emotional world. By the time these boys become men, the disconnection is so deeply embedded that many do not even recognize it as a problem. They have learned that strength means stoicism, that leadership means control, and that emotional expression is weakness. These beliefs do not disappear when a man enters a relationship. They show up in how he communicates, how he handles conflict, how he responds to his partner's needs, and how he models behavior for his children. The tragedy is that many men operating from these patterns are not intentionally harmful. They are simply living out the emotional programming they received, often without ever being invited to question it. But intention does not cancel impact, and the impact on the people closest to them can be profound. One of the most common and damaging patterns that emerges from emotional stagnation is unavailability. This does not always look like physical absence. A man can be present in a home every single day and still be emotionally unreachable. He may be physically in the room while being completely disconnected from what is happening relationally. His partner reaches out for connection and receives a shrug, a deflection, or a change of subject. Over time, she stops reaching. The emotional distance becomes normalized, and what was once a vibrant connection slowly becomes a coexistence. For women in these relationships, the experience is often described as loneliness within partnership. There is someone there, but not really. This kind of loneliness is particularly painful because it is invisible to the outside world. Friends and family see a couple. The woman inside that couple feels profoundly alone. She begins to carry the emotional labor of the relationship entirely on her own, managing not only her feelings but also anticipating, interpreting, and managing his. This is exhausting in ways that are difficult to articulate, and it often leads to resentment that builds quietly over years before it finally surfaces. What happens between parents does not stay between parents. Children are extraordinarily perceptive, and they absorb the emotional climate of their home with remarkable accuracy. When a father is emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or conflict avoidant, children learn from that. They learn what relationships look like. They learn how men are supposed to behave. They learn what to expect from the people who are supposed to love them most. A daughter who grows up watching her mother manage all the emotional weight of a relationship may internalize the belief that this is simply what women do. She may enter her own relationships already primed to overfunction, to tolerate emotional unavailability, to mistake endurance for love. A son who watches his father avoid accountability or use control to manage conflict may replicate those same behaviors, not because he is a bad person, but because that is the model he was given. The generational cost of unaddressed emotional stagnation is enormous. It does not end with one relationship or one family. It travels forward, shaping how the next generation understands love, conflict, and connection. Another pattern that frequently accompanies emotional stagnation is conflict avoidance. On the surface, a man who avoids arguments might seem easygoing or even peaceful. But conflict avoidance in relationships is rarely about peace. It is most often about discomfort. When a man lacks the emotional tools to navigate difficult conversations, he will do almost anything to prevent them. He shuts down, changes the subject, minimizes his partner's concerns, or simply leaves the room. The result is that legitimate issues never get addressed. Problems accumulate. The woman in the relationship begins to feel that her concerns are not valid, that she is too much, or that she is the problem for even raising the issue. This is a form of emotional dismissal, and it is deeply damaging to a person's sense of self. Real peace in a relationship is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to move through conflict with honesty, care, and mutual respect. When one partner consistently refuses to engage, the other is left holding unresolved tension indefinitely. That tension does not disappear. It transforms into distance, resentment, and eventually disconnection. Emotional stagnation also frequently manifests as a need for control and a resistance to accountability. When a man has not done the internal work of understanding his own emotions, fears, and triggers, he often attempts to manage his discomfort by controlling his external environment, which frequently includes the people closest to him. This can look like dismissing a partner's perspective, rewriting the narrative of arguments to position himself as the reasonable one, or responding to feedback with defensiveness rather than curiosity. Accountability requires a level of self-awareness that emotional stagnation actively prevents. To say, "I was wrong," or "I understand how that hurt you," requires a person to sit with discomfort, to prioritize the relationship over their ego, and to believe that acknowledging a mistake does not make them less worthy. For men who have been taught that vulnerability is weakness, this is extraordinarily difficult. But the refusal to be accountable is corrosive. It communicates to a partner that her experience is not valid, that the relationship is not a safe place for honesty, and that she will always be managing around his fragility rather than being genuinely met by him. Personal growth in this context of relationships is not a self-help trend or an optional upgrade. It is the baseline requirement for genuine partnership. A relationship cannot thrive when one person is doing all the emotional work. It cannot sustain itself when children are absorbing unhealthy patterns. It cannot survive indefinitely on the goodwill and patience of one partner while the other remains static. The good news is that emotional growth is always possible. It is not reserved for a particular type of person or a particular stage of life. Men who have spent decades operating from patterns of avoidance, control, or emotional disconnection can and do change, but only when they are willing to look honestly at themselves and take responsibility for the impact of their behavior. This often requires support, whether through therapy, honest conversations, trusted mentorship, or a genuine commitment to self-examination. It requires the willingness to be uncomfortable, to be wrong, and to prioritize the health of the relationship and the well-being of the family over the protection of the ego. Relationships are not static. They are living systems that either grow or decline, and the direction they move is largely determined by the choices both partners make, particularly the choice to show up fully and honestly. When men commit to emotional growth, the transformation is not only personal, it is relational and generational. A man who learns to be emotionally present becomes a partner who can be truly known and truly trusted. He becomes a father whose children learn that men can be both strong and tender, both accountable and loving. He becomes someone whose presence in a family is a source of safety rather than tension. For women who have been carrying the weight of emotional labor alone, this kind of shift is not just welcome, it is life-changing. It means finally being in a partnership rather than a performance. It means raising children in a home where both parents are genuinely present. It means building something that lasts. The cost of refusing to grow is paid by everyone in the family, but the reward of choosing growth belongs to everyone as well. That choice, difficult as it is always worth making.